Morning Year 6, I hope you're all well and ready for your next 2 weeks of learning. This video is going to try to explain to you a bit more about the active and the passive voice, which I know some of you have already had a go at, so it'll just be a refresher. For some of you this will be completely new, so do not panic at all about that. I'm going to try and explain it in a way that hopefully will make it clear for you. So the active voice is when somebody is doing something to somebody else, or something is doing something to something else. Okay, it doesn't always have to be a person. So my first example of this is the astronauts flew the rocket. Okay, the astronauts in this example are doing something. They are doing something to the rocket, they are flying it. Okay, so that's active voice because they are actively doing the verb, the flying. The astronauts flew the rocket. Okay. The passive voice is when we switch it around and think what is having something done to it by somebody else. And that word by is often quite a good indicator whether it's the passive voice. So if I was to switch that sentence around to make it passive voice, it would become the rocket was flown by the astronauts. Okay, so the rocket's not actually doing the verb, that's being done by somebody else, and that makes it the passive voice. So I'm going to give you some examples to help you to consolidate that. So for my first example would be, the puppy was chewing the furniture. Something that she likes to do. So the puppy was chewing the furniture would be active because the puppy is doing something to something else. She's chewing the furniture. Now, if I was to change it to the passive voice, then I would think what is having something done to it. So it would be the furniture is being chewed by the puppy. So I've been able to use that word by to say who is doing it to the furniture. Okay. My next example might be Miss Macdonald turned on the television. And then in the passive voice, obviously the television has had something done to it. So it'd be the television was turned on by Miss Macdonald. So here are a few of the kinds of sentences that you might expect to get in a SPaG test. And what you'd probably be asked to do is to identify whether they're active or passive, or you might be asked to turn it into the opposite. So let's have a look at each of these sentences. So in the first one, I've got the girl ate the apple. So the girl is doing something to something else. She's eating the apple. So that would be active. And if I was going to turn it to a passive voice, then it would be the apple, who's having something done to it. The apple was eaten by the girl. Okay. In this next sentence, the leaves were blown by the wind. There's my by, that's my clue that that's in the passive voice. Because the leaves are having something done to them by something else. So if I wanted to turn it into the active, I'd be thinking what's actually doing the action. So it would be the wind was blowing the leaves. Now, I've said was blowing, I haven't said the wind blows or the wind is blown. It's important that you keep it in the same tense, okay? So this is past tense, so I need it to be in the past tense as well when I turn it into the active voice. In this one, the dog was chasing the squirrel. So the dog is the one that is doing the chasing. So that's an active sentence. So to turn it into the passive voice, it would become the squirrel was chased by the dog. Now, this last one I've given you is a bit of a trick one, and they tend to like to put this in your SPaG test. It says the book was returned to the library. Now, it hasn't got the word by in that sentence, which makes you think it must be active. But actually, if I was to continue that sentence, I could add in the information of who that book was returned by, couldn't I? I could say the book was returned to the library by the girl, or the book was returned to the library by Jonathan. I could add in who it was returned by. So always check that you can't explain who it was done by if you think it's in the active. So that actually is a passive voice sentence. Okay, now you wouldn't be able to turn it into the active unless you knew who it had been done by. Okay, so you'd just leave that as it was.
So your challenge now is to see if you can find some examples around your house of people doing something to something else, or of things doing something to something else, and have a go at writing maybe 5 sentences that are in the active voice, and then 5 sentences to turn those into the passive voice. Okay, let me know if you want any clarification, or if you need me to check anything or talk through anything with you. You can always drop me an email, but I hope that has made a bit more sense for you, and hopefully that will help you to crack on with some of your SPaG activities in your SPaG homework book. Okay, speak to you soon.